Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to the Journey My Mother's Son podcast. I'm Dan Clouser, and I'm joined today with another one of the disciples in the success program here at the Dream Center of Southeast Texas, Caleb Boaz. Caleb, thanks for joining me today.
Yes, sir. Glad to be here, man.
I appreciate it. I know, it takes some strength to sit down and tell your story and kind of throw it out there for, anybody to hear. But I appreciate that you guys understand that there could be some listeners out there who may be going through some things that your story will help them find the help that they need.
Absolutely.
So you came here as somewhat of a ultimatum, I guess.
Yeah, I had some extrinsic encouragement.
You had a choice of prison,
yeah,
or the Dream Center.
Right.
And you chose the Dream Center.
Yeah, it was a hard choice.
So, tell me a little bit. You're 28 now.
Yeah.
You started using when you're 16, which again isn't that uncommon.
No.
A lot of kids in America start smoking weed when they're 15, 16 years old, whatever the case is. Well, let's kind of recap, these last 12 years, what you think it was that led you to using in the first place, and then how it just kind of spiraled out of control. Like I said, you weren't in an abused household. I'll let you tell the story. I mean, you had good parents who were visible in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, just take it away. I mean, let's tell the story a little bit.
Well, I had a pretty traditional Christian upbringing in Southeast Texas, like what you would expect from like God-fearing parents, and really no internal conflict or behind closed doors issues going on. It was a pretty strict household, but that was because of the way that like our society directly contradicted Christian culture or Christian standard, like what cultural standard would contradict with Christian standard. But from a young age, I think I was really motivated to kind of fit in, and Christian wasn't cool. So I kind of like rebelled a little bit, or found myself having multiple different faces, different masks. Like whenever I would go to school, it would be one. I would be trying to fit into the best of my abilities, which was more of a vulgar, like fitting in with the guys, like locker room talk. But then on the weekends we would go to church, and that was a whole different game. Still trying to be cool, but it was like more of a Christian cover to it.
Right.
But whenever I started using drugs, I think I had that typical middle child syndrome, and I wanted to fit in, but like all of the people that I thought were the coolest, were like, because I was really into music, I was really into like the rock stars going on at the time, and punk music and all that, and a lot of what they stood for was the opposite as well. But I remember just not really wanting to like sacrifice my social status in order to uphold some kind of moral standard that I didn't necessarily believe in. I started using drugs, I think more on a whim than anything else, like hanging out with the people that were doing it as well, and they were convinced that was the cool thing to do. I think like up to that point, I had been trying to juggle, keeping everything in balance. And it was starting to like kind of stack up on my shoulders. Like I was starting to feel this like heavy oppression of needing to get the right grades and have the right girl and go say the right things in class and in church, and trying to juggle this daily these daily like almost like chores. And I remember like the first time I smoked weed, getting a release from that, and like there being an escape there for the first time in probably my whole life, being able to remember like knowing that, or being able to just shirk that responsibility and say, I'm cool with like maybe the people that are in charge of me not being okay with what I'm doing right now.
Right.
Being able to move forwards, or being able to kind of make my own decisions.
Right.
I like to read a lot, and I remember specifically my sophomore year of high school, reading a book by Malcolm Gladwell, and a lot of his principles were really built around like trying to teaching people to like think for themselves. And I had this like aha moment of realizing that like adults didn't like graduate with their certificates in being adults now, and like that they didn't necessarily have like the right answers all the time, that they were also imperfect, and realizing that I didn't have to accept what other people thought I should do for myself. I could try, kind of make those decisions for or I could build those decisions based on my own experiences.
Right.
But that didn't go well for very long.
Right.
I remember I got kicked out of my parents' house when I was 16. It was kind of an ultimatum as well, where my dad found out that I had been smoking weed and stuff, and I didn't want to go to church, and there was this big debacle. It wasn't like he was just trying to do the best he could. But I moved out, and I started hanging out started living with other people that were in the same situation as me, like not for whatever reason, not being under the umbrella of their legal guardians, and we kind of all depended on each other. And I remember knowing that we weren't making the best decisions, but also kind of having like a rebellious like teen, like this is cool attitude about it. Right. Until one of my friends, Samantha, had died, and she went to a party, and she was like the least of how bad we were. Like she was the one that she had a kid. She had gotten pregnant when she was like 15 and had a kid, and so her parents were upset more so about that. She drank, but she wasn't like really thrown off like the rest of us. Right. And I remember she went to a party and she drank too much and she died from alcohol poisoning, and that really kind of set off just set me into a spiral of like the little bit of sense I thought I could make of the world. It just didn't anymore, and it only went down from there.
So after that happened, did you start using different drugs? I mean, you said it was a spiral. So what all did that spiral entail at that point?
Well, it's interesting because it was me and then two other friends of mine and her, and we all lived together. And so whenever she died, it made the bond with the other two naturally like really increase. We all kind of mourned together and had this almost like brotherly bond over it, and stuck by each other's sides. But because of that, we made sure that we took care of like having a place to stay and stuff. But what we should have done was probably go back to some form of fundamental stability. Right. Instead, it started off like with like cocaine and drinking a lot and partying every weekend, and but it did graduate into like what I would call like an experimental phase, where there was like acid and there was Molly and all these other experimental drugs, I guess.
How old were you at the time?
17 and 18 mostly.
17 and 18, doing coke and acid, Molly. I mean, it's just. And some really of my listeners are going to listen to that, and they're going to be like, how does a 17, 18-year-old kid even find that? And I think it's probably a lot easier than what
one of the kids
most
that we
of my
stayed
listeners
with,
might think.
His dad was the like neighborhood like weed dealer. And so all growing up, that's what his dad did for a living, collect like collect like disability or whatever he got, and welfare or whatever it was, and then also sell weed on the side. And I mean, at the time, it's funny because your twisted perspective. At the time, we thought that was probably really cool, like right. That was like the dream job. But now that I'm a little older, you realize that an adult, selling weed for a living to his son's like 14, 15, and 16-year-old friends is pretty messed up. Yeah. But that's because of that. Whenever you grow up in that kind of environment, it's a lot easier than you'd think, especially like the more. Like the deeper you go into families that started off like that, the more you find kids that have easy access.
Right. So you're experimenting, you're using more and more stuff. Eventually it starts, having some run-ins with law.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of I mentioned earlier that I had solid parents that were part of they were really involved in the community. My dad was a police officer. My mom, she worked for the church and did inner city missions, so really well connected, even all the way up to the council, like city council. And it seems like everywhere we go in public, somebody knows my mom.
Right.
So I always say it's pretty funny that, or it's not a coincidence that a classic rebellious middle child syndrome kid has a cop for a dad and a social services, worker for a mom, and he ends up being a social deviant criminal. It's magnetic almost, like opposites attract. But let's see, where was I going with that?
Just we were talking about how you started getting those run-ins with the law.
Oh yeah. So with my dad being a cop, he was really plugged in. Beaumont is a pretty small city, and so everybody kind of knows. Well, not everybody knows everybody, but every cop knows every cop. Right. And in that graduated even to Orange, where I was most of the time, where I grew up. And I think the first time I got arrested, I was 16, and I had cocaine in my boxer briefs, and they didn't find that, but I gave because I was scared of getting searched or whatever, I gave the cop a fake name, and he figured out who I was, and they called my dad, but I got out of it, needless to say, and that was being out past curfew as a minor, and luckily they didn't find anything really serious on me, because that would have been, as a minor, catching or what could have been a first felony. But that wasn't the only run-in. I increasingly put myself in more and more undesirable predicaments with the law. But every single time, I was able to get out of it because of who my dad was.
Right.
And it wasn't necessarily that it was like, just wash your hands. It was more like a favor to him, but really it was no favor to me. Not that I'm not grateful for it. I definitely am not. I'm grateful for not having the record, but that came back to bite me. With that, it built I don't know if it built a complex as much as it just fueled a delusion that I could get away with.
You're almost above the law.
Yeah, or that there's no consequences for my actions, and that's coming from a kid that sits here with 11 felonies pending, waiting to go to court to be basically at the mercy of the court, and potentially, if worst case scenario were to happen, like the best case scenario is that I'm going to do 5 years in the pen, like after this is over. Now, that's not necessarily what has to happen, but I would be deserving, I would be within, like I did what was necessary to get that kind of time,
right.
That punitive charge. But I know that there's all kinds of like different things that the courts are capable of doing because of what I'm doing now.
Right.
And but it had an adverse effect, I think. And even my mom's told me that before, that they don't think they did me any favors by keeping me from having, those DWIs and those minor possession charges hitting my record and stuff. But it was definitely out of control. Like even like I was used to ride around town in Beaumont on a motorcycle that was like illegal. I didn't have a license. It was unregistered, and like I got pulled over by like 3 cops that let me go because of who I was, before finally another cop that even knew my dad was just willing to risk pissing my dad off, and was like, we're gonna take your bike and let you go, and they kept it. But I really, it took a long time to come to any kind of realization of like action consequence.
Right. So before we were recording, you said this is definitely not your first stop in rehab. What makes the Dream Center different, and why is there hope here that this might be your last stop in rehab?
Well, I know. I think it's kind of a 2-part answer. Like, one being that I've learned that recovery isn't really it's not like linear. Like it's kind of like how like some days you'll be performing at your best, and that's you, but then also some days you'll be performing at your worst, and that still is a part of that's still you. It's just all of the encompassing your best and your worst is what makes up what you are. Same thing for, I think, recovery is like my first recovery. I was think I was 22 years old. I went to a nice place, one of the more bougie places that they pride themselves in drilling you with the big book or the book of AA, their handbook, like drilling you with their knowledge and making sure that you have a full and complete understanding. And I don't think they're under any delusion that that's going to keep people sober. But what it does do is you can't say you don't know, and it does like get into your head all the material that you really need to get sober.
Right.
Because you learn that it's not like there isn't this safe, or there isn't this like all cure all solution for sobriety. It's not where you go, it's how you do your time that you're there. Like you have to build the tools and build the routines and build the disciplines that you're going to use when you get out. Though I do love the Dream Center, and I love what it has to offer, and I love that it's a faith-based program, and the longevity of the program. You can come here with the wrong motives and stay the whole time doing the least possible to get by, and as soon as you get let out the gate, you might as well have not been here at all.
Right.
You know, you have to build those disciplines and build those those muscles, you know, to that once you get out, you're able to actually keep using them.
Well, and I think it really comes down to the fact that you have to make the conscious decision that
You're done.
you're done.
Man, and it's funny that you say that, because like I've been to rehab, like I've been to one rehab like here, like at Senecor, like a state ran facility, and I gave it my best. Like I was done. I was sick of it. And now I don't necessarily think I would have stayed sober regardless, but I kind of also got cut at the legs. I had gallstones. I had to get my gallbladder cut out. But and therefore they put me back on opiates, and I'm a heroin addict. And I stayed sober for a little bit, but once that was re-triggered in my brain, like I know a lot of people have a problem with the disease concept, but regardless of where you fall in the disease concept, whenever you have a physical, like when you've ever had a physical like reliance on something, once it's re-administered, it triggers more than just how you feel in that moment. You know,
Right.
there's all kinds of sentiment attached to it. But you know, that was probably the least program, like the least like bougie or, you know, nice like supply, like prepared, you know, provided for program I've ever been to. It's like one of the only programs I've ever been to that didn't have a personal chef. You know, like
Right.
like we were really spoiled. But it was one that I tried the hardest in. And then even since then, I've been to nicer places, and because of the circumstances that got me there, it's like I wasn't ready, and I hadn't made the decision myself. And like you had said, the conscious decision, like if you didn't make the decision for yourself, even if you made the decision to be there, but for some reason it's like you're doing it for someone else, like your mom or you know, your kids, even though those are good motivators, it's not enough. You have to do it for you.
Right.
And I've learned that time and time again. But really, it's not about where you go. It's about what you put into it.
Right.
Like you get out of the program what you put into the program.
Yeah. So what triggered that conscious decision this time, where Caleb walked in this gate and said, "This is it. This is the last time"?
So I'd like to say that the extrinsic motive, or like that you know, that it was simply that I was done, and it would be nice to be able to say that it was just like because of like, oh well, I was gonna die, but the truth is that I don't know any, especially whenever you get down to the point of doing something as serious as like a heavy opiate like heroin. Like most heroin addicts don't, like most self-respecting heroin addicts don't have any, don't have like much, they've come to terms with that they might die in their addiction, you know, and that's in the physical, the physical demise is not enough of an extrinsic motivator. And I'm living proof of that. I've had multiple overdoses. I had sepsis, infection in my blood, and I had a wound in my arm that got infected, and it cratered out like a good like pound and a half of meat from my arm. I had renal failure, kidney failure, like just really.
And again, at what age?
20, I think 25, or the first time my kidneys failed, I was only 17. And I knew I was too young to be having kidney failure, but it was a mixture of just chemicals, just spiking those liver enzymes so high, and then going out and doing physically extraneous activity, not drinking any water, you know, and it has consequences, you know. And so I'd like to say that the physical was enough, but it just wasn't. But once, I think, like, I know I came to a point in recovery where I remember my first time to really try to get sober, that the fear was no longer that I might die, but it was more so that I might live and keep doing this and see more people hurt, more people die, more of the suffering. And, because as much as what we're doing was bad, a lot of the people that I was around were in the same predicament we're like, just like, they were good people. They're making really bad decisions, and some of them die, some of them don't make it. But this time, I think the reason that I wanted to stop was because not only I don't have the access any longer, but that I might do serious time, like years and years and years locked up behind bars. Was a strong motivator. It was a hard, it was a reality pill that I needed, hard to swallow pill that I really needed to look at for long enough to not just like push it off in my delusion.
Right. And you talked about the kind of the events that got you to that point with the list of felonies. If you want to share that, and even what you did in your trying to outrun the cops and that sort of thing.
Well, I mean, and because I think in the more and more desperate I got, the more and more that I realized that I had no real, my inhibitions were just getting lower and lower. And I know, over the past year, I think it started in 2020, with COVID hitting and everything, I had already got to the point where I was stealing to provide for my addiction. But that was the beginning, I think, of really just, apart from that, prior, I think for the most part, my criminal activity was that I was constantly breaking the law by being in possession of something. By having chemicals and I stood in my righteous indignation of thinking, they can't tell me what to do with my own body. But there was a switch whenever it stopped being my own property on me, and starting to steal to provide for my habit. But it also, I think that came with a recognition that this was out of control and not knowing what to do about it. And there's no way to co-sign it or say that it was not what it was. But as that progressed more and more, you can look at my record and see the chronic progression of my criminal activity. Because it starts with a simple possession charge, and it was a couple of years ago. And then then there's multiple possession charges and unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. Like I told you earlier, it's
a nice way of saying stealing a car.
Yeah, exactly. It's a hard thing to do to prove that you're actually the one that stole the car. So if you're driving, they can get you for driving it without permission. They're just not going to get you for the wires that are unattached and screwed together, and But I have 3 of those. I have 4 of those on my record. 3 that are pending right now because they dropped one, I think, because I wrecked it and they let me go to the hospital and then they couldn't put me back with the bike or the motorcycle. But so it's like once you realize you can't, or that not necessarily you can get away with something, but whenever you're under the influence of drugs and you're not making the best decisions already, and you're at point A and you have to get to point B, and you know that your only solution at the moment is walking there, stealing a car sounds a lot nicer than it would if you were just taking a stroll in the park. Especially, I think the worst thing is that you get away with it once. I've heard a statistic, I don't know how accurate it is, but somewhere around like 70% of crimes go unsolved, but it's like the 30% that get caught, they've also been involved in some of the unsolved 70%. You get away with it once, you keep doing it, eventually you get caught. But so it kept progressing. In 2020, I got arrested, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, and then after that, luckily I didn't have any drugs on me on that case. And then I bonded out. I got arrested again with 3 possession charges for 3 different felony narcotics, and meth, heroin, and Xanax. And then I got out, bonded out again, got popped again, three more felony possession charges and an unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, and then I got bonded out. And then in that process, I think I had one more where I'd fallen asleep in the car, but that was my friend's car. I didn't steal her car. She let me borrow it. She was pissed that I got arrested in her car though. But then I was staying with a friend, and just like in a hotel, and I don't know, we had broken into these what are they called, storage units, and we had found a bunch of guns, and that was the beginning of the end, because we knew that these were worth a lot of money and we wanted to sell them and whatnot. But something about whenever you're on a power trip like that, something about having that in your possession, and you're already making all of these horrible decisions, and it makes it kind of hard to let go of them all because of the difference that it makes whenever you have it, and I held on to one knowing I shouldn't have. And then that day of, like I said, when you're doing a lot of drugs that lower your inhibitions already, you make bad decisions. And I got in an argument with this guy and ended up trying to rob him outside of our hotel in broad daylight. And somebody probably saw us. I know he had told me that there was somebody watching us, but I didn't want to look away because I had a gun on him.
Right.
And I guess they had called the cops, and the cops pulled up right after I'd pulled the trigger and it had gone off. I'd been on a meth and heroin binge for like four or 5 days, no water, no food. And as soon as I hear somebody yell and I look to the left and the cops are running down this alley at us, so I turn and I book it the other way. And from my just dilapidated physical state, I was able to clear one fence and then take about 3 steps. It was like running underwater, and I collapsed. And they pulled up on me, and they didn't realize that, or they found the gun in my pocket, so they didn't keep searching me. And I had 10 Xanax bars on me. And I don't know if you know about like benzodiazepines, but they don't mix well with opiates. And that's actually a big cause of overdoses.
Right.
Like, you can do heroin, you can do benzos, but you can't do both.
Right.
And I didn't want to get caught with the benzos. And without even thinking about it, I took 10 of the, I had 10, I think it was 10, it might have been more, Xanax bars in my pocket. And I grabbed them and I ate them all at one time. And then I remember nothing. And then I'm in the hospital, and I blink, and it's like I'm in a hospital, and they've Narcan me, so I come out of my overdose, but Narcan works for opiates, it doesn't work for benzos, so I'm still really out of it. And I blink out again, and whenever I blink back to, the cop's in an argument with the doctor saying, he needs to be released so I can go to jail. And the doctor's like, he's like still barely stable, or not stable. My blood pressure was all over the place, and he's pointing at my monitor and freaked out. Whenever a doctor's freaked out, I'm a little freaked out, because they stay calm even when you're dying,
Right.
But and then the next thing I remember, I blinked out again, and I woke up 3 days later in a padded room, and had fully, I wouldn't say fully withdrawn, but I'd been through the worst of the withdrawals. And I'd like to say it was and I realized that I had made these horrible decisions and I needed to turn from my ways, but I immediately got on my one call and was like, get me out of here. And with, saying I made a horrible mistake, same thing I always say, but with full intention of getting out and doing exactly what I always did, and that's, I think, the crazy part.
That's crazy.
It's crazy that that this legal predicament, regardless of how bad it is, it's what saved me. I was in this perpetual state of being just determined to ruin myself, and I think that I had come to terms with realizing that I was probably going to die doing it. And like I said before about but the fear then, I think, was that maybe I wouldn't, and I'd have to live with the consequences.
Have you ever asked yourself, how'd you survive that night? Honestly, by all, common terms, you should have died that night.
Yeah. And that's something that I know, that because I was able to get immediate medical attention, I'm pretty convinced that, but even then, Narcan doesn't always work. And especially depending on the drugs that you're on, and heroin's at the top list of how powerful you can get with, and nowadays everything's laced with fentanyl, which is 100 times stronger than your average heroin. I do ask myself that, and I know that logically I want to downplay things, and say that there's probably a natural explanation, but I do have one instance where I was in my apartment by myself, and this wasn't that long ago. This was during COVID, right before 2021, I think, was going to hit. And nobody lived with me. I lived in a room by myself and pretty much isolated because the government was giving us money for unemployment. So I was able to not depend on anybody else. Rarely did anybody come by. And my mom is a huge, really awesome Christian lady. She's spiritually in tune. She's spiritually disciplined. She really, I think, has a special relationship with the Lord that's hard to have in American society, just because of all of the things that all the systems the devil has in place here that can tune, or that can throw so many different stations at you. It's hard to tune into the right one. Right. But honestly, this is also a testament, I think, to me coming to terms with my own salvation, and having to face some things that before I was kind of willfully ignorant about. I kind of preferred not know, but I'd recognized that I'd done too much heroin that night, and I was falling asleep, or they call it falling out, just falling over myself. And my bedroom was kind of raised up off the ground, and I kept waking up on the ground because I would tumble over, and I was desperately trying to stay awake long enough to get my meth going, so I could try to wake up, and I couldn't, and I finally locked my torch on so that I could try to smoke some meth to stay awake, because I knew I was falling out. I couldn't stay awake, and I was every time I woke up I had foam in my mouth, and I was having to scoop this foam out of my mouth, and I was blue, and I could tell I couldn't breathe. My eyes were aching, which happens whenever the blood cells start to burst in your eyes, and I fell out with that torch locked on. And it started lighting everything in my apartment on fire. And at that one, I went down. And, whenever I think, how did I survive that night? I have no doubt in my mind that God, he acted. He acted on my behalf, because I have such an awesome intercessor on this planet as my mom. Because I was in Austin, Texas, a good 300 miles away from my mom in Mauriceville. And she was woken up with this feeling in her stomach that something wasn't right. And that not only was something not right, but something wasn't right with Caleb. And my parents know, they're trying to balance this relationship with me while I'm acting out like that, and it's hard to do. But they know, if they call the cops on me, then I'm gonna be upset. But my mom's just you got to, right? My dad, you got to call in a favor and get a civil, or a what's it called, a welfare check, or a wellness check. They come by just to make sure that somebody's alive, because they haven't heard from them, and in probably in a matter of probably a window of 30 minutes, I probably wouldn't have made it. But my mom had that gut feeling that something wasn't right.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that was one of the times where I could not deny that not only was there probably a God, but my mom knows him and she talks to him. They have conversations. And that right there, changing from a deist perspective to a theist. God didn't just make this happen and then walk away. Yeah. He made this happen, and he's watching, and he cares, and he's constantly available, and makes himself available, even though we've fallen so far as just humanity in general, not to mention my own escapades. Right. Fallen so far from the original intended purpose. It can be heavy.
No doubt. So you kind of start to go through this transformation of a kid who rebelled against God, rebelled against Christianity, for really no good reason other than, the typical teenage kid wanting to do the opposite of what his right. parents were saying. Yeah. And you end up here at the Dream Center, and you've found a personal relationship with the Lord.
Absolutely.
So going, I guess you kind of knew what you're getting into coming into the Dream Center, that it was faith-based, but
Yeah.
probably not completely. So, talk about your first couple days, couple weeks here, and, again, not being your first stint in a rehab. What was it that was like, okay, this is different
It
than
definitely
anything
is
I've gone
different.
through?
I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with traditional rehab, but this isn't it, and I love that about this place. I've learned to love that about this place. I wasn't hyped about it in the beginning.
Yeah. We're like, sign me up, man.
Exactly. Yes, sir. And because whenever I came in here, I knew what I was getting myself into, and I was very okay with it being faith-based. I wasn't crazy about the no cigarettes thing, but you can't smoke cigarettes in jail anyway, so not much changed.
Either way, you're giving up cigarettes.
Right. Yeah. But whenever I got here, I did have these, because my parents are like, oh, well, the Dream Center's in Beaumont, and they might be able to take you. Don't get your hopes up, because, a lot of places don't take aggravated cases. Like, once you have a violent offense, it can be hard to find somebody that'll take you on, especially somewhere that's free, where you don't have to pay or be in a halfway house with other violent offenders. It's crazy to think of myself as a violent offender. But, yep. Yeah, buy the ticket, take the ride. But I had this idea I told them, I was like, well, tell me about the program. They're like, when my dad told me specifically, he was like, I like it. He was like, it's a hard time for me to be impressed with these places, and I'm impressed. And I knew I was in trouble whenever he said that. Because he's a pretty intense guy. Like one of our punishments, he used to go get a truckload of dirt, and he'd get them to bring it out to our yard, and they'd dump it, and he'd tell us to move it from one side of the yard. And we lived on like a 4-acre tract. He'd be like, move it from that spot to that spot over there. And then once you get done, you'd be like, okay, so I'm gonna have to spread it once I get there. Bring it back.
Move it back.
So whenever he said he liked this place, I knew I was gonna be working for sure.
Yeah.
Which is funny that the things that I thought that I would hate the most about this place are the things that I've benefited the most from.
Isn't that so cool?
It is. It really is. Like, in my addiction for the past years, even my sober time was spent solely focusing on sobriety, which kind of gives you an ultimatum of one of two choices. You either stay sober or you get high. Right. There's not, you lose the gray area of like, what about all the other good or bad decisions I could be making? But this place, you work, and therefore, whenever I get out of here, I'll be accustomed to working, which is something that's a muscle I had to learn how to integrate. Right. But whenever I showed up here, it wasn't traditional rehab. There was very little traditional rehab going on, and I was upset about it. I was.
Because you knew the script.
Yeah, exactly.
You knew the script of traditional
rehab. I could get through rehab upside down, soaking wet on my hands, and blindfolded, and nobody would be able to tell me that I was wrong, even though sometimes the smart ones can see through your facade and go, you're rehab rock starring right now, like you just know the rights. But there's no doing that here. Like you can do the right thing. Script. Oh yeah, very different script. Oh yeah, and that's just from the natural realm perspective. It's just like you will work hard here, and it's kind of just what's expected of what we have to do to maintain this place. Right. And in the grand scheme of things, like this place, for what it has to offer, it's a necessity. Like you need somewhere people can go whenever they don't have other resources. Like we've had a couple of guys that were, just out there, like really, if we're on, Jupiter, they're Pluto, right. I remember, but I do remember that, in this coming months and months after I'd gotten here, after, God had softened me up spiritually a little bit, but people being like, oh, they just need to go somewhere else. This isn't the right place for them. And I'm like, if they can't come here, then where can they go? Right. They can't just be there's not a state hospital anymore that you can just live in, for your whole life because you don't have the mental faculties to survive. It's like you're saying that he needs to go make up a percentage of the homeless population that has no other choice. Right. And that's not, That's one of the cool things this place has to offer is the least of these. You know, they'll give the least of these as much as they'll give the people that come in with the highest, accolades.
The grace that we talked about last night.
Absolutely.
Meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So had you already made a commitment to the Lord when you got here, or did it happen after you got here?
It was in that willful ignorance. I think I always knew that God existed, and he showed himself in these situations that I was, like I said, I was determined to fail, and time after time of being delivered, each time it was like kind of more of a progression of like, okay, I acknowledge that there's more going on here than I can possibly see. And I understand that it's what my mom's in my ear about. It's this God that loves me and is omnipotent and he cares and whatnot. But it wasn't until I really kind of made the decision, or once I was in the jail cell, that I felt like, and most of it's spiritually discerning because it happened quickly. But I had like this vision. I have a 4-year-old that I've almost had no involvement in her life, just hard feelings between me and the mom. And her mom moved to Virginia, in the dead of night, so that I wouldn't be able to get any kind of legal
access.
Exactly, and because I'd have to go to Virginia to fight some kind of
custody battle.
Exactly.
Whatever.
And in all honesty, that was probably for her best, in her best interest. I can see that now. At the time, maybe not. But I got this like vision because you're in that position of all I've done for years and years is run and be on these heroin and meth binges with little, like we're talking like 3-month at the most breaks in between of not even being convinced of that I'm gonna even be stopped or that I know how to stop.
Right.
And so I finally I'm laying in that jail cell and the question I couldn't help but feel like I was being asked by life, if not God himself, is like, what do you want to do with yourself? Like, what do you do from here? It's like, well, what are my options here, man?
You've pretty much hit rock bottom here, brother. So what?
I thought it was kind of funny because I felt like I had no options, but it just, like I said, it's spiritually discerned, but I felt like that question in my spirit just going, no, what, like if you could do anything, what would you want to do? And my even this is how sick I was. My immediate reaction, my natural instinct was to go get out and be able to do what I've always done with no consequences. Like every addict's dream of just not having any negative consequence. Being able to do what I've always done, but just without the paying for it.
Right.
Which makes no sense. But we live in delusion. But then I was like, no, let's really evaluate this. I feel like I'm in a conversation with something that might not ask again. It's like, well, I want to be able to start over. I want a second chance. Like, I want to not feel like I've got a chain and ball to this lifestyle and to a substance to be okay. I want what I originally, and I know it sounds like almost like I don't want to say pathetic, but like it's what I had. It was what I was originally offered growing up with the family that I was given.
Right.
But I was like, okay, I just want a second chance. I want to try it again. And in that moment, I got this almost dream of me and my daughter at the soccer field in Beaumont. And even though it was so quick and it happened so quickly, there was just this urge, this hunger to go home. And Austin was home at that point, and I survived best in Austin. I hadn't been in Beaumont in years, and my parents were tired of me being around Beaumont because of what I've done around them.
Right.
And so I knew it was probably from the Lord whenever I called my parents that night and was like, I want to come home. And and it sounds crazy because it's like how Caleb, like what you're not exactly it's not like we could just come pick you up.
Right.
I was like, I don't know how we're gonna do this, but I want to come home. And they were both, even my dad, like, all right, let's do it. Let's figure it out.
Did that surprise you?
Very much so, because I was prepared to fight tooth and nail of saying, I'm done, I'm going to change, I'm going to do something different. I'm convinced that Austin has nothing. And I knew that was going to be the dagger in my old life, was telling my parents that Austin was a bad place, because it is a bad place, but it's also a great place. Like, it has the best recovery Texas has to offer, and people come from even as far as like the Northeast, like New Jersey and stuff, to come down for our recovery. But where you have a bunch of really recovered people, you have really recovered people that relapse and are really not recovered.
Right.
And so both sides kind of coincide there. But telling them that like I ruined any chance of Austin being good and that I needed out was definitely the straw that broke the camel's back on that. Now, that does not mean that they're going to allow me to come home, but when they were both on board with that, I was shocked. I really was surprised. But I know that my mom had, oh, this is cool. My mom had a prayer group. Being the devout spiritual woman that she is, I'm sure that what I put her, I can't imagine what I put her through, but she needed support. And so she found a prayer group with one of her best friends. And they had, whenever I got arrested, my mom went to their prayer group and they were praying for me. And she said that it just felt like the Holy Spirit touched down, like it just poured in. And they had been, some lady had brought chains, and what God had told her or something, that like whenever, that tonight some chains are going to be broken. And whenever they were praying and the Holy Spirit touched down, one of the ladies told my mom, she was like, something happened. Like, I think like something big just happened. And my mom was like thinking like, I can't wait to hear from Caleb to see what just happened. And that was the time that I called and was like, I need to come home. And she was like, bet, like, let's do it. Because she knew something was going on. And it was like that. Like prior, whether I was going or wasn't going to do heroin was only a matter of what was in between me and the heroin.
Right.
But after that, after this whole conversation with God, like it's like that it being my choice was returned, because I could still choose to be, what I was, but it's not that my choices to have been that already no longer define me. Right. Like I don't have that urge that's beyond my mental compulsion. Like I couldn't restrain myself prior at a certain point. And after that, it was like that part of me was given back. Yeah. I almost don't even remember what it felt like to be like that.
Wow.
It was interesting. It was definitely like a liberation there.
So it's time to look forward.
Absolutely.
Throw the rearview mirror away.
Yeah. And it's funny because drugs, one of the things that drugs had to offer, or one of the things that I sought in drugs was an escape. It's like, I felt like the pressures of life was like being in a car and like the rain, it's raining like real heavy, and you can't see the car in front of you and you don't know if the road's going to turn, and that anxiety that wells up. Mm-hmm. I felt like that all the time. And whenever I found heroin, it was like whenever you're in that rain and you hit a bridge and there's that peace and that stillness and that just break. And whenever you come out the other side, it's just not quite as bad as it was. Right. It gets there again, and that it builds and it builds and it builds, but then you get another bridge, and it had provided that for me until it didn't. But once it doesn't anymore, you're addicted to that bridge, like you need that bridge to be okay. Right. And that's past the point of whether you want to or it's no longer fun for you. It's like you need it to wake up and and drink some water. You need it to do anything, to go to the store. You need it to be able to function, or else you'll be physically sick, and also just you have no internal drive whatsoever, for anything. It kills your horse on any kind of desire. But it's funny that like what I was seeking in that escape from all that pressure, it's like what I had to give up was actually just like that selfishness that was driving it in the first place. Like that whenever I came to truly, like in that moment, whenever it was relieved from me, and only stronger as I've grown and as I've been spiritually taught or spiritually been growing, I've learned that like I get that rest in God, and God provides that rest through, or Jesus provides that rest through what he's done already, and that it's a finished work. Is like Matthew, Matthew like 11, to come to me all you who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest for your souls. It's like, I found that rest. It's a permanent rest. I don't have to go back into the rain. And the only thing I have to do to access it at all is just allow Jesus to do it for me. Like, it's not anything that I do for me. You know, it's like, I'm not on a performance-based acceptance any longer. I'm on a Jesus-based acceptance,
Right.
and he only grades pass fail. You know, and if I believe what I need to believe, then everything else will fall in line. You know, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it is.
Like, to find that your best drug that you've ever done was going to be accepting something from someone else from Jesus Christ himself, that's salvation.
Yeah.
And that with that salvation came the peace and the rest that you were looking for in all of your
All
addiction.
those years, yeah. So you're doing great in the program. You know, I love having conversations with you and just hanging out with you. But there's still kind of this cloud hanging over that, you know, you could do all this stuff and, you know, go through this program flying colors, and the court could say, you know, you're going to get locked up for 5 years, 10 years, who knows?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Actually, like, because I've had to look at that pretty heavily, and it's funny how it's worked so far, is because I had this really awesome lawyer, and I think this, like, I'm not going to be superstitious and say, you know, God's orchestrating this directly, but because a lot of it's consequences for my actions, and they're gonna, you know, that's detrimental. That I understand that, like, it's like, you know, if I, as an alcoholic or whatever, like, coming to Christianity, it's like I get saved, my spirit gets saved, but my body still has all of the damage that I did to it. Now, do I believe God could heal me from that? It's a question, or, you know, conversation for another time. Absolutely, I do. But my past is still going to have consequences. But whenever I first got here, I had 11 felonies, and this lawyer, this court-appointed attorney that got me here, who was a blessing. You know, like, even though he was a court-appointed, he was responding to one of the court-appointed events
That's
that they have to
amazing in
accept.
itself.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I got to be honest with you. That is amazing in itself.
And I wish that it was still amazing, but he has closed his practice and moved on. And so I don't have him any longer. But by the end, he had been in such good communication with the judge that we were that he had told us, and I'm pretty sure we were under the impression that that like 7 of my felonies had been dropped, and that was huge, you know. While the other I'm pretty sure they all probably would have been the lower level felonies, but, you know, and everything was looking good. Like, all of the updates that he gave were positive. But then an update came: I'm closing my practice, going to work for the DA, and we're gonna get you. You're gonna be transferred to a new court-appointed, and immediately the anxiety comes up. But like, what I'm learning from that is that, like, I had a lot of trust and faith in his ability,
Right.
But this situation is going to require that I have trust and faith in God's, you know, sovereignty. And that, like, regardless of what my predicament is, and regardless of what the consequences are, that I don't stop doing what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
You know, that if I do end up having to go to prison, that, like, that's a consequence for my actions, and I need to go into it with the same kind of determination and attitude that I'm doing this with.
Right.
You know, that I need to accept that. Well, not even need to. I think I've come to terms with it. Like I was saying, we had thought that a lot of them had been dropped. Then we got this new lawyer, and they're like, no, a lot haven't been dropped. You've been indicted on 4. It's an F1, F2, 2 F3s, and you have 4 F3s waiting to be indicted. And with this new lawyer, a lot of other stuff's happened. But at first, when I heard that, the anxiety started to come back, and it was pretty much the first time I'd really felt anxiety since
Right.
I'd got the relief. But I remember just thinking, like, I've got to put this in God's hands. Like, there's not anything I can do about it. And I think I've come to terms with the cloud isn't so much of a cloud as much as, like, I'm just trying to learn, you know, how to get that rest regardless of circumstances.
Isn't that the Serenity Prayer?
It is.
You
The
know?
things that I can't change. You know, and
That was a prayer my mom lived by.
absolutely.
You know, so when you guys recite it here on a Friday night, it's very near and dear.
Sentimental.
So
And one of the things I think about is that, like, when Jesus came to earth, it had been talked about for the 400 years of silence that whenever he showed up, he was going to be this mighty conqueror that delivered them from the oppression of Rome. But Jesus wasn't concerned with the oppression of Rome, because the problem that the Jews were enduring wasn't being oppressed by man. It was being oppressed by sin. Regardless of my circumstances, I don't need to be delivered from my consequences. I need to be delivered from damnation. I need to be delivered from the direction that I was headed. I need to be delivered from being an eternal being that wasn't going to heaven, meaning I'm not going to stop existing just because I die, and it's not going to get any better from here. Living eternally separate from God is not, it's the consequence. But I'm learning to look at that regardless of circumstance, regardless of situation. Prosperity gospel, in my opinion, isn't it's not really realistic. Jesus, if prosperity God, if Jesus had preached prosperity gospel, he would have told them that they were going to be delivered from, or he would have attempted to deliver them from their oppressors. But instead, you have Peter and everybody telling them, no, submit to your authority. That's oppressive, and forgive your enemies and turn your other cheek. And, whenever somebody persecutes you, rejoice in getting to share in the sufferings of Christ. I think that's the perspective. And if God needs me in prison, and that's where he can use me, and I know he can use me even if I go to prison.
Right.
And if that's where he needs me, then that's where I want to be. That's kind of just, I was in the driver's seat for so long, just running amok and running into buildings and not driving well, that knowing that Jesus will drive for me now is a relief.
Jesus take the wheel,
yeah,
right?
I'm cool with it. I'm not even sitting in the passenger seat checking the map or anything.
Right,
I'm
right.
crashed out in the back.
Doing the air brake or something,
Oh yeah. I'm cool with it. I'm cool with whatever every direction he wants me to go.
That's an incredible outlook, and I commend you for that. I don't know, faith or no faith, that there's a whole lot of people who would have that same outlook in your situation. So I absolutely commend you for that. That's special, without a doubt, that you've just accepted. You've asked him to grant you the wisdom to accept the things you can't change and just put it in his hands. So that's awesome. So, honestly, I could probably sit here and talk, another hour with you, but we are 27 minutes from Psalms and Proverbs. So we just about running out of time. But is there anything before I get to my final question that, that we didn't talk about that you just want to, say to if somebody's out there going through what you went through, and what would that one piece of advice be?
I think one thing that does give me a whole lot of solace is, I think I told you earlier, but also I realize there's a Viktor Frankl quote. He was a psychiatrist and neurologist that also went through concentration camps. 4 of them, specifically starting with Auschwitz, the death camp. But I remember after he got liberated, he was walking through a field, and in the beauty, he fell to his knees and just asking God, and it wasn't, you'd think he'd say something like, why? Why have I endured this? Mm-hmm. Why is there this kind of hatred in the world? Why have I, or not even why I, but why my people? Why everybody around me has been subjected to such suffering? But instead, it was a moment of submission for him. He said, "From my narrow prison, you answer me from the freedom of space." And I really like that. And whenever I look at the biblical text, I can promise anybody that it has an addiction issue, that if I can do it, that you can do it. And I know people even worse than me that would say the same thing. If they can do it, then I can do it. And if I can do it, then you can do it.
Right.
But that but it's not anything that I'm doing. And I like to stress that because it's a hard thing to wrap your head around. But it's just submitting to God and letting him do it for me. And I can't stress how important that is enough. and there's a lot of scripture that backs it, but just about how like God pursues us. He's pursued me, and he's made himself very relevant, very present. Now it still requires an amount of faith, but even that is a gift from God. That I have faith, the faith that I have, it came from God. But all I have to do is submit to him, and he does the rest. I can live confidently in giving up that performance-based acceptance that I used to live in, and knowing that anything I need, he'll provide for me. All I have to do is daily crucify the thing that was getting in the way the most, which was myself. And as long as I'm selfishly pursuing anything, I'm going to be putting a veil in between me and God. That sin that I was committing, more so, no matter what sin I was committing, it was trying to live independently of God. No matter what that looked like. Even if it, you could say, even if I was helping other people, if I was trying to do that independently of God, then that it was the right thing with the wrong motive.
Right.
But just to submit to God and let him do it for you.
It's awesome. So, like I told you, I always ask my guests the same final question. And the subtitle of the podcast is Many Little People in Many Little Places, which comes from the opening lyrics of a song by a guy by the name of Michael Franti, which go, when many little people in many little places do many little things and the whole world changes. What's one of the little things that Caleb does on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place?
I thought about that today, and even though it's nothing spectacular, my mom's always said that I'm a glue person. In that, like, whenever people and events come together, that I have this attraction clause that brings, that gets people interacting with each other. And one of the things she loves is because I'm not the center of that attention. I'm trying to just get everybody interacting with each other, not, looking at me or interacting with me. And looking at that, any situation that I've been in my life, I've recognized that I even whether it was positive or it was negative, I want everybody to be like, to know that we can do this together. Like I did a stint in the Marines, which is a story for another time. But like knowing that the guy to my left and the guy to my right are going through exactly what I'm going through right now, it made me feel less like significant, and more more like group minded,
Yeah.
But I'd say it's there's a character trait that we have is joy, and it's regardless of it's the ability to lift the spirits of others regardless of outside circumstances. So regardless of what your externals look like, being able to keep everybody kind of just happy, that's what I like little acts of or random acts of encouragement, words of encouragement.
It's a big deal, man. It's a big deal. And I love that, that kind of concept of, we're better together. Because obviously being a former baseball coach and, preaching and teaching teamwork all the time, I used an example in my book that I'd used with one of my teams when we weren't playing very well as a team, where I once saw a study where they took plow horses and they figured out that a single Clydesdale could pull 6,000 pounds on its own, but two Clydesdales together could pull 36,000 pounds together.
Awesome.
And that's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it, because in our natural, we're thinking, well, they're going to be able to pull 12,000 pounds. But just two units, two energies going the same direction can multiply that weight by 6 times what you can do it on your own.
That's pretty
It's
awesome.
pretty amazing. So I love the answer, and it's definitely not a tiny little thing. It really is a big thing. So I appreciate you taking the time. Again, I mean, I love being here and talking to you guys, and hearing your testimonies, and giving you the opportunity to kind of throw it out there in the airwaves. And you never know who it's going to help. You never know who is going to listen to this and say, you know what, I need to make a change. And there's obviously a certain amount of vulnerability that goes into telling that story, and that translates to bravery. So I appreciate you taking the time and being brave enough to tell the story, because I think it can definitely help some people.
It's funny because one of the things that I tell guys whenever they come in is, even if in every other facet of your life, in every area of your life, you suck, like you're the best person to do one job, and that's to be, that's your testimony. That's like, when you are delivered from this thing, like, you are also like the best. You're like, you have the most, how would you say that? Like, because you were afflicted by drugs and alcohol, whenever you're freed from that, you're the best person to like convey that message to the next time.
Absolutely.
Maybe that can help somebody. That's awesome.
It's awesome. I'm sure you will. So again, I appreciate the time. For my listeners out there, be sure to check out my blogs and other podcasts on my website at danclouser.com. Caleb, again, really appreciate the time that you took to sit down and talk to me.